I'm Keith Olbermann, and this is The Resistance. After the worst 10 days of self-inflicted wounds in the history of the American presidency, it is clear that this administration, predicated on revenge porn, will end up in only one way. Unless Trump resigns first, he will be impeached by a huge margin, and he will be convicted, possibly unanimously. Not necessarily because of Russia. Not necessarily because of obstruction of justice, not necessarily because of mental unfitness, most likely because Trump keeps threatening the people who are politically on his own side. I have previously suggested here that this is not so much a presidency as it is a hostage situation. It is now becoming obvious that there's an added dimension to that analogy. It is a hostage situation in which Donald Trump keeps threatening to harm the hostages, except he doesn't have any hostages, which still hasn't stopped him from making a series of increasingly ridiculous threats against not hostages, but against his own party, the Republicans, who are literally the only people standing between Trump and his removal from office immediately. Saturday, Trump threatened Congress, all of it, representatives, senators, their staffs, Democrats, Republicans, threatened to cut off their Obamacare. In case they missed the point, Monday morning he threatened them more explicitly and added a threat to the powerful insurance lobby, which has spent millions to get Republicans to oppose Obamacare for the last decade. If Obamacare is hurting people, and it is, why shouldn't it hurt the insurance companies, and why should Congress not be paying what public pays? He personally threatened twice about money the congressman who will eventually vote on whether to impeach him, and he threatened the senators who will eventually vote on whether to convict him, and he threatened the industry that makes huge donations, mostly to Republicans, and he threatened the Republicans, the only group keeping him from being removed from the White House because he is still just barely popular enough with his base to possibly be an asset to the Republicans in the midterm elections next year. If you think I'm being pie in the sky about the Republicans eventually impeaching the national embarrassment in chief, consider their response to the story which he has endlessly called a hoax and a witch hunt, and about which Trump threatened everybody, a bill to sanction Russia for its interference in our election last year, which passed the House and the Senate by a combined 517 to 5. Five guys on Trump's side of this, more or less. Congressman Amash of Michigan, Duncan of Tennessee, and Massey of Kentucky, and Senators Paul of Kentucky and Sanders of Vermont, and call me naive. But I don't think Trump can count on Bernie Sanders voting to acquit him during the impeachment trial. Incredibly, after the Russian sanctions vote, Trump went right back to threatening his own party. John McCain's famous thumbs down to kill the last repeal fiasco might as well have been a different digit pointed in the opposite direction. It followed 2 years of Trump abusing McCain and months of him threatening every Republican senator, once remarkably enough, to their faces, even the ones whose terms do not end until after his will. McCain didn't kill repeal by himself, of course. Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski was just as valuable, and her vote came 2 days after Trump's hapless Secretary of the Interior called up and threatened both of Alaska's Republican senators with what would amount to financial punishments against their state because Murkowski had voted no on a preliminary health care vote. The health care threats against Republican senators and congressmen, and I keep emphasizing Republican because Trump's behavior makes you wonder if he frequently forgets that he is a Republican. These threats did not end when the latest bill to repeal Obamacare ended. Saturday, Trump declared the Senate a joke because of the 60-vote threshold that didn't apply to this Obamacare vote anyway. Then he specifically wrote that the Senate Republicans, quote, look like fools. Then he tweeted, they are laughing at Republicans. And then back at it in the afternoon, tweeting, unless the Republican senators are total quitters. The next day, Trump's budget director said it was official White House policy that nothing else gets a vote in Congress before health care. Again, in Congress, where Trump lost on Russian sanctions a total of 517 to 5. Congress, which clearly is no longer afraid of the White House, no longer kowtowing to the White House, no longer paying attention to the White House. Congress, which, with Trump's approval even in the conservative Rasmussen poll down to 39%, does not have to pay attention to him anymore. But the threats that may be putting the plan of impeachment into the hearts of Republicans and not just Democrats have hardly been limited to Capitol Hill. Trump has threatened his own attorney general. He's threatened his former FBI director. He's threatened the special counsel investigating his possible complicity in the Russia scandal. He's threatened his former acting attorney general. He's threatened his ex-press secretary. He's threatened his ex-chief of staff. He's threatened China, Germany, Australia, Iran, Canada, Mexico, Japan. Jokingly or not, he's also threatened his ambassador to the United Nations, his director of health and human services, his advisor, Steve Go Bannon Yourself Bannon. And after he supposedly turned over his business interests to his sons, he ended a presidential news conference by threatening to fire his sons. Threats are all Donald Trump knows. They and lawsuits and not paying his bills and then daring you to sue him are how he turned an inherited fortune into a slightly larger fortune in only 40 years. They have worked because the world Trump more or less succeeded in and the character he played on television consisted exclusively of other people who could be bought or sold with money, or the promise of money, or the threat of less money. And though money is far too close to being the root of everything in this country, Trump has mistaken all of politics, all of governance, all of America for one large cash transaction, when in fact we are still based mostly on clans and demographic groups and ideology. Every day it must absolutely astound Trump that hitting people with his wallet just doesn't work in this environment. His frustration is obvious. It is clouding what little judgment he had to begin with. It is hastening his removal from office. And that is the only service he has ever done for his country. 517-5. Resist. Remove. Peace.